Hola! Welcome to the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club with your host, the man from the land of Lincoln Heights, that is, David Hernandez, and from the city of San Fernando, Jeffi Girgenti. You heard it right, Hispanic Republicans. Why? Because brown is the new red, Republican red. So listen up and hear what being a Republican is really all about. Faith, family, and free enterprise. It's time to wake up and see how the chorizo is made and smell the menudo. And who knows, you just may be a Republican after all.
David, we're back at Saturday night. And we're live.
already the 8th of April.
I know.
The month's gone already.
David, really?
I mean, but
don't say that because our board of our LA County Board of Idiots.
You have a voice for radio.
I know. Our LA County Board of Idiots tried to pass this ridiculous.
But let's start at the lower pecking order.
Let's not. But go ahead.
LA City Council.
Oh, good Lord, not again.
Well, Mark Ridley Thomas was convicted.
Yes, thank goodness. I told you, and you wanted to say, "Oh, I feel bad for him." No.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
Are
come
you
on,
kidding?
no.
I felt bad for his son having to resign from the assembly and then getting that cushy job at USC, and then the jury not being able to hear that
he's guilty.
No, that the lady over at USC that was in charge of like the social
who lost her job. Who cares?
Who pleaded guilty?
Who cares?
Before so the jury found Mark Ridley Thomas guilty without even knowing that the person he was dealing with had already pleaded guilty. And so, boy, he must have really been guilty if they did that.
I told you.
But let me digress back to the city council.
Okay.
Because he was on the LA City Council.
Right.
Okay. And then he was suspended. They put in.
And they paid him.
Well, and remember he sued them and he took him to court.
Yes.
And then, the controller had to go ahead and
pay
him.
Did he have to pay it back?
But now, and here's the big issue. And I want to reach out to some of my very long time Democrat friends around the Leimert Park area, Earl O'Farrell Hutchinson. If you're out there, should they be calling in? They should know. They'll call in next week. But the main thing we want to do is I call him the Dark Lord from when he first ran for LA City Council in District 2, Paul Kekorian, when he moved into the district in order to run. Paul Kekorian, with the demise of Nury Martinez, is now the president of the LA City Council. So Paul Kekorian and Curran Price, and as I recall, the FBI also raided his office at some time in the past year. But they want the voters in District 10 to have a vote.
On what?
Not to vote on who their replacement city council person is, but that Heather Hunt has a vote. The person that they picked to represent the 10th city council district, they don't want to give the voters in the district a special election. They want one of the former aides of Kamala Pants to have.
Wait a minute, are
vote.
you talking Yoga Pants or Kamala?
Kamala Pants. Kamala Harris. She worked with Kamala Harris. So in the interest of giving the deserving constituents, stakeholders in District 10 a voice in what happens in City Council, they want their hand-picked person to be able to vote there rather than giving them a special election. Kekorian said, well, it's only for a few months. A few months.
They could do a lot of damage.
The election
in a few
is in March. The primary is in March of next year. And this is April? We're 8 days away from it being a year. And then the runoff's going to be in November. So this gal is going to be in there for, a year and a half, almost 2 years.
I can only imagine the damage she'll create.
Well, but she's also running for that seat in 2024. So all of these other candidates, most of them are Democrats. And Earl over at the Urban Policy Roundtable at Leimert Park that I used to go to on a regular basis. You need to get on the horn because Tuesday's the big vote where they're going to appoint her to fill up the position and not have a special election. So just an observation.
I didn't even know they could do that.
Well, you know what? Like with Nury Martinez, they called for a special election. And but these people, they don't want to give up that power, and because it's $8 million. Come on, a sidewalk or a bike lane in the San Fernando Valley from Roxford to Laurel Canyon was $25 million. You're worried about an $8 million couch change to these people. And so
you and that bike path, that bike path is a crow in your nest.
Well, it is, and but KDL is still with us. We were just talking. KDL definitely has I was going to say something, another part of his body, but he has the backbone. He's still there in spite of all the protests and at his house. And now Miguel Santiago is challenged. He's going to move in the district and challenge him for CD14.
Doesn't he have to live in the district for 2 years?
No, 30 days.
Maybe
this
I
is
should
LA.
move in the
This
district.
is LA. and so Miguel, who started as a staffer for Cindy Montanez, who's another longtime Democrat friend. I get along with Democrats that really believe in what they say, and not some of these other people that just use their skin pigmentation and Democratic registration in order to get their will. So, Kevin, look out! Here comes Miguel Santiago, and all you people and the LA Sentinel. All the constituents in District 10, get on the phone. Don't just call Krikorian. Call all city council
Show
members.
up at his office. Tell him
and
now.
demand that you have a special election in City Council District 10 because elections have consequences. So here we are.
And they do have consequences. Look at our Board of Supervisors. You
Yep.
got Hilda Solis. And you've
former
got
senator.
Lindsay Horvath, who both decided they were going to press through to do this, get these people out of jail for $50,000 bail. Or what? Explain it, David.
Jeffi, I mean, but the
I'm
system,
so frustrated.
The system
I can't.
is so unfair. They have to reimagine.
Yeah, but the reality is they want it. So when I campaigned for Assembly and I campaigned for LA County Board of Supervisors, I was the only one talking about that they wanted to close LA County jail.
And you were criticized as being a
I
lunatic.
was criticized as being a complete lunatic. They would never do it. And here we are. Lindsay gets on the board, and now that's what they want to do. They want to close it. But before they want to close it, they want to empty it.
Yeah, well,
so the Board of Supervisors decides they want to pass this bill that anyone who had $50,000 bail or less should just be let out. And thank goodness that we had people watching. Now, because of the pandemic, this is one of the better things that came out of that pandemic. And that is people had no idea the Board of Supervisors, who they were, what they did, or what the power was that they have, or how much their budget is of $48 million. Now we have watchdogs, and they are leeching out all the information that they want to sneak into their agendas. And they tried to sneak that on the agenda on Tuesday, and there were enough people who said, oh, no, I don't think so. Yeah. We're not doing that. And they ended up pulling it at the 11th hour, I think, like on Monday night, but not before they had a huge uproar. So this is what I want to say, is that we've got people coming in tonight that are going to talk about that.
About the county?
Yeah, about that particular thing. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing that people don't realize. We have 3 board of supervisors up for election. We have 5 supervisors. So right now we got 2 that tried to pass this. They got it nixed because too many people said no. But if they reelect these 3, or they reelect 2 of the 3, they will pass it in 2024. They're going to pass it. They will pass it, and people need to be aware, who are you voting for in these districts? Mm-hmm. Know who these people are running for the Board of Supervisors, and ask the question, are you okay with closing LA County Jail with no other place to put these criminals? 1. 2, are you okay letting people out for $50,000 in bail or less? These are people that are sex offenders. These are people that are rapists. These are people that are child molesters. These are people that are robbers, burglars. These are not safe people we want on the street.
These are people who there was a sufficient evidence for them to be charged.
Correct.
And that our next guest probably had a hand at some point in his career in sending people there to be charged or to try them as they were going to court. So why don't you go ahead and introduce our first guest?
Yes, so we have John Lewin here. John, welcome.
Thank you.
I've been wanting to bring you on for a very long time, and due to circumstances, this is the first chance we've had to get you here. And tell us a little bit about who you are, because you are a pretty amazing, you're a very humble man, but a pretty amazing man in the career that you have created.
Well, thank you very much. I've been a prosecutor in Los Angeles since 1994. Since 1997, I pretty much have exclusively worked investigating and prosecuting cold murder cases. I did that. Originally, I was the founding member of what we called our cold case task force, which had a fancy name, but it was basically me. And it sounded bigger than it was. And then when we redid our cold case homicide unit out of our major crimes division, at the end of Jackie Lacey's administration, myself and my partner Bess Silverman, we were the founding members of that team. And I've been in major crimes, or was in major crimes, for almost 20 years. I was the longest serving deputy in that unit, and I think the history of the unit. I've been very blessed to have a great career. I was prosecuted a man named Robert Durst. I was leading the team that handled that case. I worked on that for almost 10 years. I got a conviction along with 4 other terrific lawyers who worked on the case with me. And George Gascon took over as the DA in the midst of that trial. I was a vocal critic of his not just poor policies, not just crazy policies, but illegal policies.
Yeah, there's a big difference
between you don't agree with his policies and that they're illegal.
Right. So it turns out that there are an immense amount of policies that he has which are absolutely idiotic and crazy, but that's not illegal. But it's not good enough for him to just implement just crazy, outrageous policies. He has also tried to implement illegal ones. I was one of the lawyers that spoke up. I spoke up internally and externally. And then coincidentally, according to him, and just routine, as a matter of routine policy, I was transferred out of the Major Crimes Division, and I'm now a calendar deputy in an area court in Inglewood, where I'm able to utilize my cold case investigation and trial skills. Not at all.
Not at all. I mean, here's the thing. So now we have some, and you're not the only attorney we've had on. We've got another attorney coming in your office that you know very well. So here we have people with your amazing expertise, and I'm gonna let people know how amazing you are, and that you've been on Dateline, you've been on 48 Hours, you've been on Court TV, you've been on Cold Case, and I'm sure there's a few other that you've been on as a specialist in the cases that you've prosecuted and closed. You're known for having gone in on circumstantial evidence. You've had 6 or more cases, I believe, that were with no body and still able to convict and make a guilty verdict out of someone who was guilty of murder. Correct?
Yeah, so I've developed an expertise over time, particularly in complex, circumstantial, and even though physical evidence, DNA is circumstantial, my area of expertise are non-scientific evidence cases, non-fingerprint, non-DNA cases.
The hardest ones you can to find, convict, and take to trial.
Well, definitely.
Take to trial, then convict.
Definitely, I think the most interesting. So I kind of have developed an expertise in guys who got rid of their wives, and usually they'd claim that the wife had, gone on some vacation.
Right.
And then, as the days, months, and years gone by and she never came back, we all knew basically who did it, and the question was putting those cases together, and that's the expertise that I've developed. I love doing these cases. I loved that job. And what's unusual about this prosecutor, this DA, is that in the past, we've had DAs who have certainly had issues with other employees in the office, et cetera, but nobody has ever gone in there with the intention of basically destroying what we do. So he has brought in a bunch of public defenders, not just public defenders, but the most absolutely crazy public defenders, people who have said things like burn the shit down about the riots, who have said LAPD trained to kill me, who want all prisons closed, want people released. He named as his second in command a kid at the time who had been a DA for 5 years, who had never tried a serious case. So
how many cases has Gascon tried?
Oh, that would be 0.
That would be 0. Well, and
that would be 0.
Well, what you were talking about, with different DAs having, a different style, a different policy. I mean, so in the time that you worked there, you worked for Democrats like Jackie Lacey, Republican Steve Cooley. How about were you there when Mayor Yoga Pants' father was the DA?
I was hired. Gil Garcetti hired me. And at the time he hired me, he was on the way to becoming governor. I still remember he was the leading. They had done a poll. I was hired right after the OJ murders and before the trial.
Well, I think that kind of took care of his aspirations for governor.
I don't know if it took care of his aspirations for governor. It certainly took care of his ability to get there.
Yeah. Well, because I think that's, and that's when Court TV really exploded, watching with Marcia Clark and what's his
Johnny Cochran.
Johnny Cochran and what was it, Kardashian?
Right, Robert Kardashian.
Robert Kardashian, and people started getting involved in watching it.
Who knew the most famous person to come out of the OJ trial would be
the
Kardashian's young daughter?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they turned in they just became multimillionaires over that case.
Well, and they're still in the news, especially.
And they're still in the news every day, especially
with Caitlyn and this whole. All these things that are going on on another issue that they're always in the limelight. But it's because it's something that, and I guess it's just human. But I know when Steve Cooley was the DA and they were bringing charges against a politician for running for office and not living in his district, and I approached Steve at a meeting and I said, Steve, what are you doing charging this guy? I said, of other politicians at the county level that don't live in their district, and you're not doing anything about it. I said, you're allowing them, the opposition, to use this office for political reasons. And he said, well, David, I can't really pick and choose who's filing a complaint. And I go, well, you know what? It kind of, I lost a little bit of respect for him at that point.
Steve was a hard-charging prosecutor. He ran the office in a fair way, and that's what we want to get back to. That's why I am strongly supporting John McKinney, who is a progressive Democrat who's running for DA, who was in the Major Crimes Division with me. He also, coincidentally and apparently routinely, according to Gascon and his administration, was transferred the same day that I was because they needed his expertise as an incredible trial lawyer supervising 2 DAs in an outlying misdemeanor court in East Los Angeles.
Well, I guess Gascon found out he couldn't fire you. He had to at least go put you in the
demote
broom
you all the
closet.
way to the bottom column and pay you the highest amount of salaries to do so.
Well, one of the issues is obviously his conduct's illegal. There's already been one settlement from a lawyer, Richard Doyle, that he retaliated against his first week. They paid $1 million on that, more with other parts of the settlement. My friend Sean Randolph, a hero in this office, who basically would refuse to go along with Gascon's illegal policies regarding juvenile offenders. That is just a nightmarish situation that is beyond even description. They went to trial. Sean won $1.5 million. When you figure in what the lawyers are going to get, that's probably another $1 million each. That's probably $3.5 million
that the taxpayers have to pay.
The county's paying.
The county is going to have to pay, and apparently the Board of Supervisors don't seem to care. They seem to back.
They're on the same Reimagine.
They're on the Reimagine the World, and they're with the $48 billion budget. So to them, and this, in the words of you, David, it's couch change.
It's bicycle lanes change.
So what we're hoping to do is we need to get this office back, because particularly, and one of the worst things that George Gascon and his people have done is the con game that they are playing on communities of color. Because if you look at who's being most impacted by these disastrous policies, it's communities of color.
And we're not talking specifically about criminals. We're talking about victims.
So what's interesting is the vast majority of victims in our cases, particularly in homicide cases, are people of color. So when you refuse to, Gascon loves press conferences. Loves them. If there's a camera, George wants to get out there and be on it. He doesn't appear to be really concerned with how accurate what he says is. He doesn't really seem to be concerned with whether it's ethical or not for him to be discussing things. As an example, he was on TV commenting on evidence on a case that had not even been filed yet. A case where
Isn't that illegal?
Well, it is certainly unethical and likely illegal.
I mean, aren't you poisoning the jury that you're supposed to be?
Well, I can tell you that you're not allowed to talk about a defendant's statements, which he did. Ethically speaking, I have never spoken to the press until a case was completed. You just don't do it because you are risking a fair trial for that individual, and you're risking the conviction that you ultimately get if that's what happens. So George Gascon is running an office where his goal appears to be to prosecute as few people as he can, to let out as many individuals. That's one of the things that people don't know. We have a resentencing unit that's being run by ex-public defenders that is going around.
Public defenders. Okay, let's talk about public defenders real quick. I'm going to stop you there. People sometimes forget public defenders are there for the people that can't afford their own attorney.
Correct. And listen, being a public defender is a noble job.
Absolutely.
And we need public defenders. I respect many public defenders. I can tell you right now, I would not be a good public defender because I'm a prosecutor. By the same token, you can't have two public defenders in a courtroom,
right,
meaning the public defender and the prosecutor who is, in essence, working with the public defender.
Right.
You've got to have somebody speaking for the victims, speaking for their families.
And for the taxpayers.
And for the taxpayers. And what we have right now is George Gascon and his administration are basically dead set on enforcing as few laws as possible. Here's a perfect example that I don't think people understand. When George Gascon took office, he immediately, without any consultation with any prosecutors in the office, he put out a bunch of directives, didn't talk to us at all. Those directives would result in the following, and I think people need to understand, this is what George Gascon came in to do. If you are an individual who is a gang member, you have 5 prior convictions, including for murder, you're on parole for murder, and you walk into a 7-Eleven with 4 other gang members, and you commit that crime by talking about your gang, and you walk into that 7-Eleven and you have a gun. All of you have guns. And you take out that gun, and you not only have it, you shoot it during the incident. Okay? Under his policies, when he came in, you cannot be charged with being a gang member. You cannot allege any of the prior convictions or strikes. You cannot allege the gun enhancement. So get ready for this. Under his original policies, you will be treated, that individual, the same way as an old man who walks in there, no prior criminal record, not a gangster, not on parole, no convictions, no gun, has a finger in his pocket, and they get the same exact charge.
Wow.
So I think people understand when George is out there talking about how against gun violence he is, etc. Why don't you enforce the gun laws that you have before you and quit pulling your con job on the citizens of this county? That's why John McKinney, when he's elected, is not going to be running an office that is there to protect criminals. His focus is going to be on common sense, protecting victims and their families and law-abiding people, and using common sense solutions to criminal justice issues when they can. So it's not that as prosecutors, we don't believe in rehabilitation or we don't believe in giving people second chances.
And that's one of the things that I think people don't realize. They see you as a prosecutor and they go, oh, they just want to prosecute him. They just want to send him all to jail. Really, my experience, and actually John just walked in. He's in the green room. We should probably bring him in. But my experience after talking to John and other prosecutors that we've spoken to is that you guys are for rehabilitation for those that you feel are legitimately going to do something with it if you give them that opportunity. Maybe they had a drug problem. Maybe they had inducted into gangs at a young age, but they have the ability to get out. And one of the things that David had done a lot, David, what was it, when you were about 20 years ago, you would go to the prisons and talk to some of the people there. And that some of the biggest people getting off of drugs and alcohol were incarcerated. And that had to do with a lot of the laws that you guys used, that prosecutors used in order to help people.
Yeah, it was prior to Prop 47.
Yeah.
So one of the problems that we have right now is people like George Gascon and George Soros, who supported him financially. Their belief is that a prosecutor's job and responsibility is to solve society's problems. And in the end, if we can help solve society's problems, that's great.
Right.
As long as our first responsibility is to make sure that people are safe. I remember when I got I have a Tesla 3, the cheap Tesla.
Oh. The cheap Tesla.
And I had an
went to the electric car.
I had an early one, and the analogy here is when I got the car. At the time, Elon Musk was talking about, he was going to go to the moon and he was going to do, I think, time, space travel, and,
right.
Reverse time. My phone didn't work in the car. So it's like before you go to the moon, before you do time, space travel,
self-driving cars. Yeah, before you turn hands free.
Right. So if you're gonna solve society's problems, the first thing you need to do is do your job, and your job is make sure that law-abiding people are safe.
Right.
So Gascon and his people view the people we prosecute, the perpetrators, the defendants, they view them as victims in the same way that the people they victimize are. Newsflash, they're not.
Right. So hold that thought. We're going to go to commercial. We'll be right back. You're listening to David and Jeffi on the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club on AM 870. The Answer. We'll be right back with John Lewin.
And we're back. And
we are back
in studio. Jennifer Kennedy.
Hello, hello.
Our legal eagle.
Here I am. Glad to be here. I just wanted to come on and let you guys know that first, we're going to get back to this amazing cold case stuff and the DA stuff. But I'm going to interrupt and do my little segment. A big exciting thing happened locally this week. And guess who it involved? Guess what school it involved?
Oh, Granada!
Yes,
your
of
favorite.
Course.
Your
Granada
favorite
Hills
school.
Charter. Here's what happened. It was really exciting. Now, you guys know I bang pots. I've been banging pots since fall of 2021 to bring that mandate down at the school. And little by little, I call it the Great Wall of Shame at Granada Hills Charter. Brick by brick, they have eroded their own mandate month by month. And here's what happened this past week. After all kinds of social media shaming and constant trolling on Instagram, etc., not to mention lawsuits in other arenas, Granada Hills Charter suddenly did a 180 on their prom. Now, up until this point, they've been denying the prom held at Ronald Reagan Library, way off campus, of course, way down the highway. They've been denying it to their unvaccinated students. And why? Because they say, as they've told these poor kids begging to go to their prom, they say, well, our policy is indoors, school-sponsored activities require compliance with our school COVID vaccination policy. And thus, they weren't letting unvaccinated kids go to prom. And mind you, this included the special needs kids who are on campus every day, all day, in class with their peers because they are exempt, having a special needs IEP or individual educational plan. They're exempt from the vax requirement, but they're still subject to Granada's cruel and stupid rules that they can't do anything else other than go to class with their peers and not go to prom. That was their rationale, that because they had this policy. So we had parents emailing, parents complaining, and we actually had a board meeting coming up for the governing board. Everybody knows that Granada Hills Charter is run by a governing board, a lapdog board that listens only to directions from the executive director at the top, Brian Bauer. And the meeting was supposed to be on March 20th. And we had a slate of parents ready to speak and give public comment and blast them for this ridiculous continued policy, the vax policy. And at the very last minute, they canceled the meeting entirely. with
Why?
no notice to anyone.
Why?
Because they're scared. Number one, they don't want the public to see them conduct their business. They don't want to be transparent. And they also don't want to hear parents with their legitimate complaints about their stupid and cruel vaccine policy. They just don't want to hear it. And they also don't want it on their public record. So what'd they do? They just canceled the meeting, and they went on their website, and they have a little table on their website that says board meetings for the 2022-23 school year, and they just erased the date like it never existed. Anyway, so they canceled that meeting, and then they secretly waited until right before spring break to stick a new meeting on the calendar. And that meeting was this past Monday, the 3rd. No one had any notice. Nobody saw it coming. And they did whatever they wanted to do in the darkness with no public comment by parents at all. And also no parents listening in. And so
That sounds like the Board of Supervisors.
Exactly. They've been taking their cue. But surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. Somehow somebody got the idea, and it could have been, was it something I said? I don't know. But they came out the very next day after that secret board meeting, and they sent an email to a couple of families. And the email said, oh, by the way, we've changed our policy, and we've now voted that unvaccinated students may attend all indoor activities. That includes dances, games, and the prom.
Oh.
So they're letting them all go to prom. This is fantastic. So I, of course, went on social media and blasted it and said, that's right, they're coming down. The mandates are coming down. And then 2 days later, they came out with a new email that said, oh, well, actually.
Oh, except for everybody that Jennifer knows.
Actually, no, they're already trying to walk back the import of what they've done. And they were saying, well, we've revised our COVID-19 safety plan on campus. Right? They're literally trying to say they haven't revised the vaccination mandates. But yet another, they have no legs to stand on left at all. But with this one, they've just chopped out the last stump they had to claim that they had any type of rationale for their policy. So that happened at Granada. That's very exciting. The kids are going to get to go to prom on April 22nd. And so we're calling it a win.
Good. You fought the big fight.
This battle has been going on, especially with Granada, for 2 years?
It's been going on since fall of 2021 when they came out with their own mandate copycatted on LAUSD. And when LAUSD stood down and suspended and never enforced their mandate, at least not the kicking out of school, Granada continued. And it was Granada Hills Charter and New West Charter that still have that mandate.
But let's remind people, we had kids that were in high school all these years that could not graduate on stage. They could not graduate.
And we had some of them in studio on the show.
That's right. They were
had to stand outside at the fence on public street property to get their graduation with their cap and gown.
They were not allowed to enter the outdoors graduation in June of 2022. What they did to these kids was cruel and unusual, and a lawsuit is coming. I'm going to let you guys know when it drops. That's going to be very satisfying, and they're in for a world of hurt over there at Granada Hills Charter. The problem is, though, so this is fantastic news that the kids, all of them, can go together to their prom. They want to be with their friends. They don't want a separate but equal event, somewhere else.
We heard that sometime.
We would have loved to. Yes, we did in the past, in our ugly past that we corrected. But still, the mandate is still up. So I'm not resting until that thing comes down.
What other laws have we got coming in?
What's that?
What other laws?
You mean
I was in Sacramento.
Oh, well, here's the thing. Okay, so shifting gears very quickly, I need to let our listeners know we have AB 1314 hanging out there, and this is what we call the Parents Need to Know Act, or Stop School Secrets. We talked about it last week, and we know we have a contagion, a problem, an epidemic in our schools now, where schools, admins, and teachers are intentionally lying to parents. They are intentionally lying by omission and deceiving parents about the gender confusion or gender identity expression of the children on campus. And this is a situation where the kid goes to school, and at school they're asking to be called by a name of the opposite gender. They're asking for different pronouns, etc. And they're not telling the parents. Okay, so this is a kid who is, quote, out at school to everybody on the campus.
And the school is providing a change of clothing?
No, not exactly, David. The one thing some schools are doing is they have what's called a gender closet. And the kids can leave the house in their birth, clothing or whatever, their gender correct clothing,
Attire.
and they change at school in order to present themselves as the opposite gender. Or some schools are actually in the nurse's office, they're handing out binders, chest binders for girls, and tucking tape for boys. So some schools are actually doing it. They're assisting the kids in their gender identity expression on campus. And
Unbelievable.
they aren't telling the teachers. And what is that?
Telling the
what
teachers
is
or
that?
the parents?
Sorry, the teachers are not telling. And so what I mean to tell you, what does that look like? Well, this is what it looks like. When mom and dad come in for a parent-teacher conference, and they sit down and they say, "Hi, I'm here to talk about my son, Johnny." And the teacher will go, "Oh, Johnny's doing great. He's doing fantastic in math. Johnny does this, Johnny does that, he this, he that." And the teacher is affirmatively using John's real name and real pronouns, but at school, they're calling John Jane. And they're saying Jane and she and her because John has somehow colluded with the teacher and said, that's how I want to be
And the
identified
principal's
at
in on
campus.
it, too.
Principals are in on it, and here's the problem. They all believe, and they've been brainwashed themselves to believe, that state law not only entitles them to lie and deceive parents, but that it requires them, that they're compelled to withhold this gender identity expression from parents, unless what? Unless the child says it's okay. This is what schools believe. There is a law, AB 1266, this is an anti-discrimination law that lets the kids use the bathrooms and the sports teams. They cite this law as if it is support for withholding information from parents. It's absolutely not. And that is why we're here at AB 1314 with our Republican Assemblyman out in Riverside, Bill Asaley, who has stuck his neck out by introducing this bill, the Parents Need to Know Act. It's going to put an amendment in the Education Code that simply says if a school is aware of gender confusion by a child or gender identity expression different from the child's sex, they are to notify parents, along with notifying parents about tardies, absences, lice alerts, progress in school, psychological testing. Schools are obligated to tell parents a raft of things, and this bill is simply going to add this one issue that you're required to tell and you may not lie. So what people need to do, the thing is, who doesn't like it up in the legislature? Well, all the Democrats don't like it. They don't even want to see this bill get a hearing. And right now, Al Muratsuchi, who's out of Torrance, he's the head of the Education Committee, and he's just sitting on AB 1314. It needs to be heard in committee. And so we need to call him and let him know this is a very important bill. Parents need to know. We need to have it heard in education. And here's his number. I've memorized his Sacramento number, everybody. It's 916-319-2066. And his Torrance number, I could pull it up for you. It's 310. Well, I haven't memorized that one. Oh, here it is. 310-375-0691. AB 1314 has actually taken off in the public's interest because Elon Musk just commented on it, and it's been like 45 million views.
Well, he must have seen the LA Hispanic Republican Club website because it is prominently, the call to action is prominently displayed with a link to all of the committee members. Well, not all the committee members, but the committee members that you suggested that we have our listeners' contacts. So you go to our website, you direct link, you can go ahead and find out who to call and where to call.
Mm-hmm. So we need to support both Bill Asaley and James Gallagher, who introduced this, and show them that this is something that the public needs. It needs a hearing. It should not be scuttled. It shouldn't be hidden. And that's what public needs to do. Because otherwise they're going to hold it. They will not put it through committee, and the bill will die.
Okay, so that's your homework, ladies and gentlemen. And Jennifer, as always, thank you for your Capitol Watch and being our legal eagle.
My pleasure.
You're awesome. We have a room full of lawyers this evening.
And ain't it great?
Yeah.
We have one watching in Sacramento, and now we have another one coming on who's another prosecutor, John McKinney, to join us with John Lewin and talk to us more about what your future is going to be, hopefully, John McKinney, and how you're going to help him, John Lewin.
You know what? One thing that I want to make sure is very clear that both John and I are here on our own time.
Right.
This isn't going to shock anybody, but not only are we not representatives of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, these opinions are our own. They do not reflect the thoughts, feelings, and positions of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, or George Gascon. So I want to make sure that if anybody is confused and somehow think that
just
we're
to be
speaking
clear
for them, just to be clear,
if Media Matters is monitoring this, they're here on their own dime.
we're on our own dime, and
That's right.
and we are not in any way representing the county or the District Attorney's Office.
Although, John McKinney, I think you would like to represent the county.
That's right. We'll be speaking in the best interest of
There
the
you go.
public, but we're not representing our office.
Well,
and good evening, everybody.
welcome back.
Thanks
Welcome
for having
back,
me.
John.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
So we know that you're running for LA County District Attorney.
Yes.
We're going to unseat Gascon, and we're going to seat you, hopefully. That's our goal.
Yep.
But I called you because I said, hey, would you be willing to come back on and talk about our Board of Idiots? The Board of Supervisors. I can call them that because I ran for that position. And I just think this whole thing that we started the show with this evening on them wanting to let out, 20%, 30% of the population that have a $50,000 or less bail.
Yeah. Well, I do refer to them as the Board of Supervisors.
I know you do.
I do have great respect for them. They represent 10 million people, and so we have to take them seriously, even if sometimes their ideas aren't very serious.
Right.
Like the one floated this past week by Supervisors Hilda Solis and
Lindsay
Horvath.
Lindsay Horvath, who's new to the board. Look, there have been interests in Los Angeles that want to close Men's Central Jail for a long time. It's really odd. Let's go over the timeline. In 2018, the Board of Supervisors voted to replace Men's Central Jail with a brand new facility. In 2018,
they spent $80 million.
$80 million in preparation for that.
Yes.
And in 2019, the board said, well, we don't want to call it a jail.
Right.
So we're going to call it the Mental Health Treatment Center. That's fine. You can call it whatever you want. Just build it. And then,
they will come.
in the summer of 2020, they scrapped a vote of 4-1. Catherine Barger dissented. The other 4 voted to scrap the whole thing, even though that meant the $80 million invested up to that point would be wasted.
Right.
So what happened in the summer of 2020 just before that vote? Do you remember?
George Floyd.
George Floyd was killed 2 months before that vote. We know how that affected the whole country and the whole world, really. It ushered in a major earth-shaking change in politics. You know, we lost our last DA because of that incident, among other things. And so that's where the politics went. Supervisor Solis has for a long time wanted to close the jail. And so for those that don't know, it's been reported that Supervisors Solis and Horvath worked together to propose a closing of the jail, that be put on the board's agenda without talking to any of our chiefs of police throughout the county, without talking to the sheriff, without talking to the district attorney, without talking to the head of probation or any of the other justice partners who would be impacted by it.
Seriously impacted. And, the other thing with that, too, is I campaigned on that early on when I ran for LA County Board of Supervisors, District 3, which is now Lindsay Horvath. And one of the things that I campaigned on, David and I took video out there, and nobody had any idea that they were looking to close that jail. The only other person talking about it was Sheriff then Alex Villanueva.
Or Deputy Brian Smith.
And but he talked about it after we had talked about it, but we got him on board with it also. And then all of a sudden we brought it out, but most people had no idea.
Yeah, it's if you're not paying attention, it's easy to miss. I don't know how many of us look up the Board of Supervisors agenda every week. Most of us don't. Even I don't, and I follow politics pretty closely. But, it's been reported that they didn't even talk to their colleagues on the board about this, that Catherine Barger was caught completely off guard by it.
Wow.
So, it's never going to happen in a county of 10 million people that you have no jail.
Right.
It's not even serious. I doubt that it's even lawful to not have a jail.
But here's the thing, and I think every one of us can agree, including you, John. You guys have been in county jail. It needs to be
absolutely.
It needs to be closed, and I never said that it didn't need to be closed.
Replaced is a better word.
No, this one needs to be closed.
Yeah,
and they need to replace it.
Yes,
without question. But you can't close it till you replace it. It's like you don't quit your job. Do you have a job?
Right.
Why are we going to close a prison? And I think what a lot of people don't realize, and I keep calling it a prison. It's not a prison. It's a jail, and it is there to house.
We know what you mean.
Well, but we'll be clear
you will be
about
criticized, believe me.
Yes, but the reason we have it is because the two prosecutors sitting here in this room, you guys have to have a place to house people that have been put up and shown that they have a reason to go to trial.
Right, and that jail was designed in the 50s.
Yeah,
it's what's referred to as a linear jail. They don't even design jails like that one anymore because they're dangerous.
Did that replace Lincoln Heights Jail?
Now you're back before my time, David. I know it was designed in the 50s, opened in 1963. And it's decaying. It's outlived its service life. We've gotten more out of that building than I think anybody ever would have predicted. The newest jail, by the way,
is that Twin Towers?
Twin Towers is closing in on 30 years old.
Right.
So we have these fundamental needs throughout our county that need to be addressed. We're one of the wealthiest counties in the country. There's no reason we're sitting here 4 years before the Olympics comes to Los Angeles and the whole world is watching us. And we've got people living on the street. We all agree we need a new jail, but the supervisors won't get together to pay for it. It's just unacceptable. It's got to be frustrating.
The difference between L.A. Central and Twin Towers isn't Twin Towers. Is that more for individuals with more mental challenges as well as criminal behavior, but also mental challenges?
Yeah, there are people with mental health problems housed in both. Men's Central and Twin Towers are situated right next to each other. The Inmate Reception Center, which sees the most ingress and egress of prisoners, is housed in the basement of Twin Towers, and it's a mess. That's in Twin Towers in the newer building. But Men's Central houses a variety of people, including what we call K-10s, which are keep-away defendants. They wear the orange jumpsuits, and they're either so dangerous that
they're dangerous to other inmates.
The other inmates, right.
As well.
Or they're being protected from other inmates. In the case that I recently prosecuted involving Eric Holder Jr., who killed Nipsey Hussle, he was a K-10 keep-away because they were trying to protect him from the other inmates. And still, some inmates got to him when he was in a court holding cell. So there's a variety of prisoners there. Some are extremely dangerous. We need a place to house them. It needs to be humane. And it needs to be safe for the deputies, the nurses, the doctors, the custodians. There are a lot of people who work in these jails who are at risk, and we shouldn't have to wait until something catastrophic happens before the 5 supervisors, or really 4, because one is ready to go, sign on the dotted line and get the building
Who's going?
built. Catherine Barger is ready to go. She's ready to replace the jail. She's on record.
There you go. So there you
Now,
go. That's why I was asking. I wanted to make sure.
We got to get Janice Hahn.
Yes.
Who along with Catherine Barger criticized this proposal this past week put out by Solis and Horvath. So I think we can assume that Janice Hahn is, at least right there on the fence, maybe leaning in the direction of replacing the jail.
And so there's a list of criminals that are on the $50,000 bails that are that they wanted to let out. What are the crimes?
It's frightening. So it's represented. What they want to talk about is in the interests of I guess rectifying what has been institutional racism and mass incarceration. Their solution is to release a bunch of individuals who have $50,000 bail or less back into the streets, back into the communities where they're coming from, primarily, many of them, most of them from communities of color. Let me tell you about some of the minor crimes that would be covered by this, because it's frightening. So obviously you have things like robbery, vehicular manslaughter, residential burglary, burglary with explosives, pimping a 16-year-old girl, oral copulation or sodomy of a 16-year-old girl, felony domestic violence, engaging in specified sex acts with a person confined in a detention facility, elder abuse, possession of child pornography, criminal threats. This is my favorite. Felon with a firearm. So let's just talk about that for a second. So you got an individual who's been convicted of a felony, all right? Who's been convicted of a felony. Now they're out and they've got a gun after having been convicted of a felony. Well, that's not going to lead to any problem. I don't know what.
And some of the strongest voices for gun control are okay with letting those people who committed a crime with a gun out or not even charging them.
Which is what I was saying before.
With Gascon.
George Gascon wants to talk about his policies and how there are too many ghost guns out there and how we have too many firearms. He's against any kind of concealed weapons permits, etc. Yet he doesn't enforce the very gun laws we have. And again, the people that are suffering, that are paying the freight, it is primarily in communities of color, in communities like where John grew up, with John's background, which I think he can talk about a lot better than I can.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time for this segment, so we want to thank John Lewin for coming in and sharing the time with us, because we want to, when we come back, we want to do a little bit more with John and talk about his campaign. And then we have the sheriff that's going to be coming on, and we have the
LA County Sheriff, retired Alex Villanueva.
Also, so
we'll be right back. So hang on. We're David and Jeffi on the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club show on AM 870. The Answer.
And we're back, and we're starting off the 9 o'clock hour. And before we get back to John McKinney, we have actually one of the newest board members of the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club in studio live. Emilio, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Emilio.
How are you doing?
Good.
Now, Emilio, I mean, and the reason that we asked you to come in, not because you're not only a great guy, you got a great daughter and all of that, but I saw that there was. Is this a new television endeavor? What's the
yeah, exactly.
Lure TV?
Yeah. So last time I was here, I think I was telling you about my show, #fake news show. Well, we got a distribution contract, and we're going to be launching on Lure.tv.
Don't forget us. Once you're out there.
Oh. Hermano, I will never forget you.
That's right.
I will never, ever forget
You're
you,
our token güerito Mexicano.
Luis, right? And Brenda, right?
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. David and Jeffi. Yeah, that's right. I forget. I'm already forgetting. No, I'm kidding. But it's Lure TV, LOOR.TV. They're a new entertainment website that is popping up, much like Daily Wire. Has been offering entertainment stuff in the conservative media space, that is woke-free. Lure as well is opening up, and I love it. Their tagline is that they're entertainment that is unfiltered by Hollywood or church ladies.
But speaking of church ladies, doesn't it have like a Christian?
Oh yeah, totally. It's like
right.
Run by a bunch of Christian guys, and and they're very dedicated to helping young men specifically. When I say like 1835, that's their major demographic. Watch entertainment that's got a little bit more meat on it than Pure Flix. No disrespect to Pure Flix, but I'm not a homeschool mom. I don't really get into it. But has a little more meat on it than Pure Flix, but also doesn't have any naked people running around. Because,
Well, remind people for the show that you've been writing and now it's been picked up. What is the real? Is it the real fake news? Is that what that is?
It's #fake news show. And what we do is we take headlines and news stories, and we unspin the narrative, and then we act it out. So it's a half-hour comedy show. It's like sketch-com. It's like Babylon Bee meets SNL. And it's just like we take it and we just act it out. Just take all the stuff that the headlines put out to you that people just kind of pass by. They do a drive-by hit, and then they make their opinions on it. Very dangerous. That's very dangerous for a functioning republic or democracy, right? And so we take those and we expand it to show how absurd and ludicrous, the New York Times is driving, and the Washington Post and MSNBC and all these other places. They're driving the narrative, but they're not really
giving any substance.
Yeah, they're not really giving any substance.
With any facts.
Yeah, and that's everything from COVID to BLM to January 6th. This insurrection thing on January 6th, it was all driven by the media. And this guy, it's like 5 cops died that day. That's, you hear the headline, and then when you actually go and you research it, you find out that no, 5 civilians actually died that day, and no cops died that day. In fact, some cops actually caused some deaths that day of civilians. But you gotta get into the news and find that out. But we thought, let's do some comedy about it, because that's how you get to people, the average person. They're not sitting and watching 6 hours of podcasts, or they're not watching Fox News all day long.
Right.
They're getting their, they want to be entertained, so they're watching Colbert at night, getting you fed, just the party line with dancing vaccine people and
right. now,
transsexual vaccine stuff. So
there's an opportunity for people to come. Is this open to the public? The event?
Yeah, 100%. So Lure is having a creator get together on the 15th at 8:00, and they're doing it at Cornerstone Christian Church in it's like Northridge.
Northridge,
right?
yeah, 20040 Parthenia Street, Northridge. Jeffi, I think when you were running, that's where we went, and we first met Lars from the Patriot, Patriot Project. Remember we?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do remember that. That was a long time ago. Yeah, that's how we met Lars. God rest his soul, poor man.
Yep.
We miss him.
So that's at Cornerstone Christian Church, 20040 Parthenia Street in Northridge. And you'll be able to meet Jason Farley, Marcus Pittman, and also our very own board member, Emilio Martinez.
That's right.
The whitest Mexican we have ever met.
That's right. I know the people at home can't see this, but I'm wearing my LA Hispanic Republican Club. If you're watching Facebook, you can see. Yeah. But when I take my hat off, I look like a lawyer.
You can pass.
Right, yeah. I look like maybe an Italian or Jewish lawyer. When I put my hat on, now I look like a Chicano activist.
That's right.
Because I got that super
All right,
vato.
so that Saturday night, the 15th, from 8 to 10 p.m.
Yeah, 8 to 10 p.m.
Okay.
Come out, meet the creators, especially if you have creative content that you are looking in that space. And guess what? And Comedy Central or Netflix is not returning your call. Come meet these guys because they're starting a revelation.
Yeah.
And if they're looking for a newscast type show, tell them a couple of people behind the mic that might fit the bill.
Well, in the meantime, we need to get the rest of our guests going.
Yep. So,
wait, I'm going to just pitch it real quick. LA Hispanic Republican Club meets sex symbols. Right here. That's you.
That.
That's going to be you guys.
I don't know about that.
Right, no, that's going to be you guys.
Well,
Thank you, Emilio.
Thanks again for coming in. And we're going to get back to our little friend, our big, huge friend, John McKinney over here, running for LA County DA Gascon seat.
All right,
so,
let's do it.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Thank you, Emilio.
So, when we went to break, John, we were talking about John Lewin was kind enough to inform us of these heinous crimes of people that they wanted to let out, the Board of Supervisors wanted to let out by passing this policy of anything with a $50,000 bill or less.
Yeah, they announced several proposals that included going through the jails and releasing people who were being held on $50,000 or less bail, which includes a lot of serious and violent offenses. Some of the proposals also included expanding cite and release by officers. We went through that terrible period where people were committing multiple crimes in one day.
All right. So, real quick, explain to people what cite and release are, because I think a lot of people don't understand what that term is.
All right. Well, most people have had the unpleasant experience of getting a citation, usually for a traffic violation.
Okay.
You're not taken into custody. You're
right.
basically given a ticket and a court date in the future. That's cite and release, basically. Okay. And we understand that that's appropriate for very minor offenses, traffic offenses, but it's not appropriate for things like robbery and burglary and assault with a deadly weapon.
You're killing us. Why can't it be that way?
But believe it or not, during the COVID emergency, our court system adapted to employ rules that would take fewer people into our jails for safety reasons. And some of those rules included what the board now wants to bring back and make permanent.
Okay.
Even though there is no longer any emergency or justification for it.
Right.
They want it because, as it's using the terminology they used in their proposal, is they want to depopulate the jails.
Right.
But John went through the litany of the kinds of offenses that would be affected by that kind of rule, and obviously we cannot live with that. We're not going to walk the streets with people 5 minutes after they committed assault with a deadly weapon.
Right.
And that's why people really need to pay attention to this and speak up and speak out about it. It doesn't really matter what your politics are. Public safety is beyond politics. But that's what they tried to get away with.
Right.
And some of them are. It's going to come back. It isn't gone forever. They've been pushing this for quite some time, and they're not going to stop until people speak up and say, okay, enough is enough.
Right. So we just had our retired sheriff, Alex Villanueva, step in the room, and we were just talking about the closing of the LA County Jail. And we know that while you were sheriff, you wanted to close it, but not till we had something else to replace it. So the Board of Supervisors, as we were just discussing, had this policy that they were going to get rid of anyone with $50,000 bail or not release.
That I referred it way back when they wanted to close a jail without replacement. That's just a suicide pact.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There is no way you can do it safely. In fact, the board commissioned their own study. They spent a lot of money, 6 figures on this study, and the study concluded you cannot close a jail without a replacement. Then came a civil grand jury, took up the same thing. They came back with identical. In fact, they even went a step further and said you just can't close it, period. Mm-hmm. Because Men's Central Jail is such a unique facility because it has 1,000 single-man cells where you can put the highest security inmates and not have, them killing other inmates, for example. Basic things like that to keep people alive. And they just refuse to accept reality. For them, they have an ideology that they just don't care. Let's just close it and see what happens, but they live in gated communities with 24-hour security, and they're not going to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, we had John Lewin, who's still in the room, talk about the list of crimes on that $50,000 or less bail. And we were just, as you walked in, John McKinney was going over how unsafe it is and how the communities are at risk, as well as the taxpayers for this. I mean, this is a problem.
Oh, huge problem. It's a real threat. But look at the sheer hypocrisy of the Board of Supervisors. It's mind-boggling. They harangued me, harassed me for my entire time in office for rehiring one deputy who was falsely accused for domestic violence. They're proposing release all people convicted of domestic violence. I mean, when you think about it, you can't even wrap your mind around that. That's how far to the left these people have gone. And it doesn't have to do with politics. It's just an ideology that, it's right and wrong. Not this red and blue stuff, but, oh, my God, what do these people expect?
Yeah, another thing to think about is the money that would go toward a new facility is being spent anyway.
Right.
So, the old adage, follow the money.
Right.
You're not kidding.
So there's something going on here where instead of building a facility and having government run a facility that houses dangerous people, there must be some notion that we're going to take that money and disperse it elsewhere.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to go too far with that because I don't know where the money is supposed to go.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are a lot of places, a lot of organizations that are taking government money to provide services, and sometimes the services are good. There are some good nonprofits out there doing the work that they're being paid to do, and there are some that are not delivering.
Right. So, John Lewin,
Well, this is where some of the issues you had with Proposition J, which all the three of us are certainly familiar with, and that the board decided that instead of just passing something themselves where they would have to take some responsibility, they played a little game where they put it on the ballot to, in essence, compel them to spend a certain percentage, to cut funding a certain percentage. And where's that money going to go to? Well, it'll be very interesting what political connections, what political favors are handed out, et cetera. It certainly is disturbing, and I know that the three of us, the ex-sheriff, John and myself, have all been in law enforcement and prosecution for many, many years and have tried to speak out about the concerns that we have. And obviously, there are powerful interests in this county, including the current district attorney, who have other interests. And those interests are protecting criminals, letting as many criminals out on the street as possible, and not protecting victims. I know the sheriff spoke up about that. John has spoken up about it. I'm the non-politician here, and I can tell you, being in the trenches as a prosecutor for 30 years, there's a lot of issues that we're trying to deal with, and it's not getting any better.
Well, the board is looking at the budget that goes towards the sheriff's department and probation as their big cash cow that they can fund all their other pipe dreams.
Right.
They have the Alternatives to Incarceration, Office of Diversion and Reentry, Jail Closure Implementation Team. $40 million just for that one little item they know they cannot close, $40 million. Right. When they canceled the contract way back in 2019, they paid an $80 million penalty to close it in one vote. This is a 10-year plan that had gone and vetted thoroughly. They knew they have to increase the capacity to treat mental health. Nothing. Then they said, we're going to do it at the community, which means all 5 districts are going to have 5 lawsuits from 5 different groups of communities that do not want to have that house there. The only place you could build without a hassle is the footprint of the current thing, which is exactly what we were going to deliver. And now they have the Justice, Care, and Opportunities Department. Talk about an Orwellian.
Where do they come up with these names? I just got to know. Where does this come up with?
Well, Measure J. Yeah, Measure J.
Reimagining.
That was a $100 million bite that came out of my budget to fund that Justice, Care, and Opportunities Department. We called it We Just Don't Care Department. And that is what they're doing right now. They're defunding law enforcement piece by piece and propping up this, social welfare state, which is against law and order and treats the criminals as the true victims. And victims, well, they were just too stupid to be a victim. And they don't care about them.
Mm-hmm. They're good at seducing people with language.
Right.
So they have this concept that they're pushing called care first, jails last.
Yeah.
Well, what do they think we've been doing for decades? If you come into the courts that I operate, you'll see defendant after defendant who's been on probation, who's been given services. Right. Some of them have 4 open cases and 3 probation cases, and they're back before the court again because we've been doing care. But at some point, the care doesn't work for every individual.
Right.
And for those that pose a risk or are dangerous or just won't comply, what are you supposed to do?
Catch and release is great when you're fishing and you need to make sure that those trout get back into the lake. It's not so good when you hook dangerous criminals and literally they get arrested, they get released back out, and I think, the sheriff can talk about this, but what happens is that you have law enforcement officers who are out there trying to proactively deal with crime. And what they discover is, boy, are they going to end up investigating? They got a very suspicious situation right in front of them. They've been doing this long enough to understand that this is something they need to investigate, but what's the consequence going to be? Our office isn't going to file. The guy will be released instantly. If somehow that individual takes out a weapon, they better literally shoot the law enforcement officer and hit him. Because if not, that law enforcement officer, if he is trying to defend himself or she is trying to defend themselves, are probably going to end up being looked at and potentially charged by this district attorney who has made it, talked about how he wants to prosecute as many law enforcement officers as possible. And his interest seems to be it's a goal, not a quest for the facts of what happened. So the sheriff knows this better than I do, but very hard to motivate your people and to keep them motivated when that's what they're looking at.
Our narco bureau had a case, 1 million pills of fentanyl seized.
It's a lot of fentanyl.
1 million. Suspect in custody, pled down to a misdemeanor by Gascon's office.
Right. But we talked about how he basically legalized drug use in the county of Los Angeles.
And theft.
And he won't charge any weight enhancements to any drugs. So whether you're moving a lot, hundreds of pounds, or whether you're selling, on the corner, you're being treated the same. And everyone must be scratching their head like, how could that be? It is because people voted for him.
Well, and then our state legislature, just in the past couple of weeks, refused to increase the penalties for individuals who are selling fentanyl.
That was Reggie Jones Sawyer and Bradford. The two of them, they did not want to create the dilemma that drug dealers may be exposed to additional time in jail. Heaven forbid.
What's that about?
Well, and one thing, when we talk about elections, with the letting everyone out with less than $50,000 bail, the law enforcement voice that we heard blowing the whistle was the former sheriff.
Yes,
not the current sheriff. Where was Sheriff Luna on this?
Totally silent.
Yep. Totally silent.
And then you get Bradford, who's trying to protect drug dealers, and then he comes up with the Ebony Alert. I mean, we have an Amber Alert, which everybody uses. And he says, well, they don't really go after and find, black children. I said, you know what? And I saw case after case where the flyer, the missing person alert, Amber Alert, anybody who qualified, regardless of color, or if there was.
Actually, on your Instagram for the LA Sheriff's Department, every 2-3 times a day, you guys were posting that. I don't see that anymore. I see it very rarely posted now for missing persons or Amber Alerts.
Now, had he steered that towards forcing local media to report on the missing person more, that would make sense. But when you add more alerts, so you have the Feather Alert, now you got this one, all of a sudden it becomes background noise, and the actual Amber Alert loses effectiveness because people are going to say, my thing's going off again.
That's true.
And it is the worst thing you can do, but that is a mentality in Sacramento and here in L.A. County.
Well,
you can't
Sheriff,
even...
I was going to say real quickly, and thank you for your article in the West Side Current.
Oh,
and that's and I posted
They're friends
that.
Of ours too.
Yeah, I posted that on Facebook. I'd vote for that guy.
I need to know who did your headshot there. I need a good headshot for my campaign.
They did miracles. That's all I can say.
They did miracles.
No, but that's good. I mean, especially some of these local papers. I mean, you don't see reporting like this in the LA Times. I mean, this is some good stuff.
We need to introduce you to the West Side Current, John.
4 years in office, the Times refused to print a single op-ed or letter to the editor that I wrote, and we did many. And we had friends. Anything that was in support of what we were doing, it was a blanket policy. Thou should not speak well of the Sheriff's Department.
Right.
Yeah.
For 4 years they did that.
I've submitted about 3 or 4, and I swear I get a response back before I hit send on the article.
You're up on me. They don't even respond to mine.
Thank you for your submission.
So now I go to the comments section of the LA Times article when they rarely open it up for comments, and I hammer it away with my name. Hey, this is what it is, and I still get censored.
Yeah.
Well, you almost have to, when you start looking at the things that come out. When you were mentioning this Ebony Alert, John and I looked at each other. I had never heard that. But it's to the point where you literally have to play a game of...
what does that mean?
No, comedy. Is this real? Is this a joke or is this real? I wasn't sure. I mean, you seem like you're being serious. You weren't laughing. But John and I are looking at each other like, what?
Yeah, that just came out last week, and... it's from the same geniuses that, hey, let's go easy on the fentanyl drug dealers. Heaven forbid they do more time.
Alex, you said something a few minutes ago about the idea of closing the jails, that the people who we elect to lead us have this notion of, well, let's just see what happens. They're doing it with our juvenile system. There's basically nowhere to house dangerous juveniles, no permanent place. And they're trying to do the same thing with adults, but it's almost this idea like there's a great experiment going on, right? And we're in a petri dish, and they're adding reagents to the dish just to see what happens.
What's going to grow more criminals into adults?
But that's the problem with this whole progressive ideology that is scary. I mean, there were traditional liberal points of view, conservative points of view, and when there was a balance in the legislature or local representative bodies, you'd have a back and forth, and you come up with policies that might have some elements of both that they work. But now that it's a one-party state, and if you're not progressive, you're not in elected office, period.
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second because I know that you're a registered Democrat, John McKinney. You're a registered Democrat, Alex. John Lewin, we didn't discuss yours because you're not running for office, and so you don't have to disclose if you don't care to. But here we have a mixed room. We're a Republican radio show, and yet we've had you guys on as guests multiple times, and John Lewin, we'll have you back multiple times too in the future. But here we are having a civil conversation. We're not going to agree on all things political, that's for sure. But we all do agree on one thing: we want a safe place in Los Angeles for us all to live and reside. We want prosecutors that can prosecute cases and put people away for the crimes that they do.
Absolutely.
We want law enforcement that's going to show up and actually be able to arrest them and have a prosecutor that can do something about it.
And we need a DA
that's
once they're arrested.
Yeah,
well, and,
exactly.
And when we talked about following the money, there are certain groups that have really surfaced especially in L.A., like Liberty Hill. When you look at where the money is being transferred out of different, say, out of probation or out of the juvenile justice system, you're talking about that.
Yeah.
They have their own agenda, and they want to get the money from somewhere, and so it's being diverted from a lot of traditional programs into some of these more progressive programs that really have no track record.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's
all right, so we're
money.
up on commercial, so we'll be right back, and we're going to see who we've got on mics after that. We've got more people than mics, but we'll work it out. We'll be right back.
And we'll be right back with Don Carlos himself.
We're live, and we have a room full of amazing law enforcement and talent in prosecution, and we've got Don Carlos that has just joined us.
Hey,
Welcome,
Don.
Don.
Hello. Yes. Good evening.
So we had quite the discussion off air, but when we closed off, we were talking about what it is to be an R or D behind your name and how it really is irrelevant when it comes to our own safety. I mean, this is the thing that it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent, or whether you don't vote. You still are affected by the crimes that are going on in LA. And if you're not voting, you need to be voting, and you need to be looking at who you're voting for.
That is very true. And the people that are impacted the most about all these experiments in crime are the ones that can afford it the least.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because when we were off air, Alex, you had mentioned something about, John McKinney, you mentioned about they were experimenting in a Petri dish. And when we went off air, Alex, you said it's more than that. It goes all the way to the top.
Yes. The experimentation is not just in criminal justice. On the homeless front, you have the homeless industrial complex.
Right.
There's one foundation, Liberty Hill Foundation, which has a lot of money invested by George Soros, for example. They dump money into Measure A. They dump money into Defeating Me, for example. And what was their agenda? Well, as soon as Luna took office, he got rid of the public corruption unit. Gee, imagine that. That it shows you that they were very target specific.
Right.
And they were looking for a return on the investment, and they got it because now they have someone in office who didn't say a peep about the potential closure of Men's Central Jail. It's like him and Gascon both. All of a sudden, their tongues got swallowed or something.
The silence was deafening. I said it was a real opportunity for the district attorney, although the district attorney does not control the jails or make decisions about whether to build a jail. He's still an important partner in the system, and he has a platform that's very visible, and he could have used that opportunity to shed light on what we all agree, which is we need a replacement for that jail.
100%.
And there, people like me want it for the inmates who are in the jail and the deputies who work in the jail because it's not safe for either group, and it doesn't help us achieve the legitimate goals of law enforcement that we have set out before us. For example, the jail was originally designed for short-term housing, right? So it's a county jail. Misdemeanors are a year or less. Low-level felony where you get probation, you might get 180 days in county jail. But when the judge says 180 days, we expect a person to serve 180 days minus whatever credits.
Right.
But the reality is, because the jail is now housing what used to be state prison inmates, and the jail facility hasn't been expanded and kept up to handle the population that this growing metropolis has.
Metropolis is almost what it is, like a little city.
If we sentence someone to county jail, I'm told, for for 240 days or less, they get booked and turned out almost immediately. They're not serving the time that the judge is handing down and that prosecutors are bargaining for. That doesn't serve the ends of justice. So we need a new jail so that the system can work the way it's supposed to work.
Not only that, it's actually even worse than that. Because AB 109, the prison realignment bill, there was supposed to be a pot of money that was doled out from the state to each county to address exactly that. Because to treat the capacity to provide rehabilitative services in the county jails need to be increased because now the average stay is increasing with the population. They're called N3s, nonviolent, non-sexual, and non-serious. And what did the county do? They created 10 pots. They dumped money into all 10 pots. 2 pots, they said, oh, that's the ones that correspond to the sheriff's department. So we'll put the money there and we'll give them 90% of that money, and we'll report that to the public. Oh, look, we gave them 90%. But what they didn't say was the other 8 pots of money, they spent it on all of their special pet projects that goes to the 501c3s. And the majority of them are the non-performing ones that are on paper only. Where is the money going? They squirreled away $1.7 billion from AB 109 money. There was an audit done by the state. And this is where, karma works as mysterious ways. Hilda Solis thought that somehow we were stealing or we were misappropriating AB 109 money. So she demanded an audit. So they audited us, I think Alameda County and one other county. They had to do 3 counties. And the result came back is that the county of L.A. was misappropriating AB 109 money. So it backfired on her.
Right.
And the point is, and then by this time, the conditions in the jail, because the mental health population as a percentage is closely on 40%. And without the resources and the staff to provide the programming needed for the mental health population, you're going to have consequences. ACLU sues. They bring up the old consent decree from the 1970s, and they're there in court with federal judge Dean Pregerson. And God bless this judge. He indemnified me as sheriff in the sheriff's department for the conditions in the jail. He said that was the sole responsibility of the Board of Supervisors, starving us of the funds needed and freezing our ability to hire personnel to have a sufficient staffing level. So it backfired on them spectacularly. So now you have Supervisor Lindsay Horvath saying, well, we need to all come together and work collaboratively because we're in a crisis mode. It's like, no, you created the crisis, not the sheriff's department.
Well, Sheriff, the game they're playing is that what they're going to do is they're going to not give the funds and the facilities that are needed for everybody to do their job. Then when they don't have those facilities, they're going to say, well, we got to let these people out. We have a humanitarian crisis. So in essence, they're manufacturing their own crisis to get the political result that they're looking for. Luckily, though, we've got the LA Times and their editorial board, and they're right on top of this thing. I think I remember reading an editorial about that audit that you. Oh wait, no, there was no editorial. I did not see that. Did not happen.
No, there's a lot of things you'll never read in the LA Times, and
like the fact all 3 of you are together in the same room on live radio.
No, this is when a lot of things we did which were newsworthy, we reckon, okay, that was kind of big. Nothing appeared. In fact, I was standing next to Attorney General Bonta as he's being grilled by a reporter from KFI about his conflict of interest with the Sheila Kuehl investigation, his wife, campaign contributions.
Now, I saw that, and it went on and off Instagram like that.
That was solid thing. And I'm standing right next to Bonta as he's getting, blown apart with a shotgun. Not reality, but... And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is special. And there was a bank of cameras. Every single local TV station was there. Everyone, from Spectrum number 1 all the way to, I think, Channel 13, and all the ones in between. They're all there. And they're all, the cameras are rolling. And Bonta's doing his tap dance and all that stuff. And then there was a follow-up question. Didn't get any better for him. That night, not a single outlet covered it. And I thought, wow. The collusion between the corporate media in L.A. and the Board of Supervisors is
real.
And the attorney is real.
It's very real.
And I saw it with my own 2 eyes.
Well, I think now the thing is that
people, it's becoming more obvious for the common folks that they're just like, wait a minute, this is clearly, these are things that were, not discussed. Like, you were cleaning up streets, you're cleaning up Venice Beach, you're doing these things, and it was received with disdain. You just want to take advantage of these homeless folks. And then all of a sudden, I think recently they've been doing some of these cleanups, and we have to go out there and do these cleanups, and it's being covered in the media, and look, they're trying really hard, they're doing this great work. Like, well, wait a minute, this work has been tried and tried upon, and you got met with lawsuits.
Yes.
So it's like there's a double standard that's definitely out there.
But the other thing, too, is here you are, Alex. You're cleaning things up while you're the sheriff. You're pulling people off the street. They're supposed to go to John McKinney for prosecution, and they're nowhere to be seen or heard of. And no one's doing anything about it. You're not even able to prosecute any of these people.
Right.
Because they won't you can't prosecute a homeless person. It's okay if they defecate on the street. I can walk down the street with my 140-pound German Shepherd. We can both take a squat, and you know who's getting the ticket? Me for not cleaning up after the dog.
One of the problems is that George Gascon wants to talk about how he is hamstrung because of the law and the legislation. To some degree, that is true. What he doesn't say, though, is he wrote those laws. He supported those laws, and it is so disingenuous when you stand up and say, listen, there's nothing I can do. That's what the law is. This happened, by the way, fairly recently. There was a horrible case in Inglewood of a young man a couple of weeks short of his 18th birthday killed a young girl and her sister, burned their bodies. George Gascon had already supported legislation that made it extremely difficult to prosecute these individuals as adults. He went back and supported legislation to make it even more difficult. Then, when the judge ended up issuing a ruling that, in essence, is going to mean this kid who's an adult, who's a man who committed a horrific act, is going to end up not being effectively prosecuted, then Gascon stood up, gave a press conference, said he's lost a lot of sleep over what's happened to this family. Yeah. You wrote and sponsored this legislation. So the disingenuousness is just insulting. This is why we got to have John McKinney, somebody who has done the job and who has been in a courtroom, who sat with family members, as I have, as a sheriff has. We have all sat down there with people who've lost loved ones to violence, and we got to get back to understanding that's what our job is. That's what we owe this county.
Prop 47 was co-authored by George Gascon. And when that came out, there was obviously a concern in law enforcement, but we kind of, that's the new rule. We applied it, we adjusted to it. And eventually, there was an increase in some property crimes, but that was for the most part. And eventually, the derailing of the whole getting people into drug court and all that, the incentivize, that all disappeared. But what we didn't expect is to have a DA that not only authored Prop 47, but then refused to prosecute the misdemeanors. So he legalized theft. He legalized prostitution. He legalized a whole bevy of activities that now we're suffering the consequences for. And you wonder why someone rides a mountain bike into a drugstore with a trash bag and just fills it up with property like it's a normal thing, and no one does anything.
Yeah.
And that is literally imperiling our commerce, our business.
Yeah.
And we need to unring that bell somehow and start reapplying consequences for bad behavior that harms.
But let's talk about San Francisco. I mean, he was in San Francisco before he was ever in L.A. Do you think maybe the voters should have thought about that?
They should have been.
A mess.
And if they were paying attention to my Facebook during the summer of 2020, they wouldn't have voted for him. But, the voters put him in office. It's going to take the voters to vote him out of office. That's the bottom line.
Right.
That's the solution. It's a political solution. He is probably going to enjoy a certain percentage of core support as an incumbent. But I think the much larger balance of people in Los Angeles County have seen enough.
And this is why the the absolute lie that this is a Republican conspiracy and that's who's behind getting rid of George Gascon. Look at the people who are out there. Mm-hmm. Look at what his popularity is. Even the LA Times conceded, and there was a poll from Berkeley as well, that had he been on the ballot, he was absolutely gone. And this is a Democrat county. This is not a Republican county. So at a certain point in time, you can only tell the public that it's sunny outside for so long when they're covered in water from the rain. The LA Times this morning, I noticed, couldn't believe it. There's an article, page 1 of the California section, talking about how in actuality crime in San Francisco is it's actually pretty normal. There's no increase there, and so.
In spite of the guy getting stabbed to death, who was the
right,
moved to Miami to get away from the crime.
That's why they're doing it, because they're very concerned. A lot of progressive people who are traditional Democrats, I know somebody who very progressive, very, very intelligent woman, very progressive, has 2 young daughters. She lives in a beautiful house in Santa Monica. They're literally homeless. Harry lives, in the driveway. You can't. Your kids can't go outside. Well, you look pretty today. Are you kidding? This is the reality that we're all living with now. Mm-hmm. And there's a point where the public's going to say enough.
Well, and the public consists of all the people that are there to try and fill the void of, say, law enforcement. You have the social services, people who are, they're tapped out. They're exhausted. And they realize that there are some people that are really, really, really not wanting their help. They whether it's mental help, whether it's any assistance. They're just like they don't want to show up. They don't want to call in. They don't want to be part of this system that they're reform of the criminal justice system, or really it's the rehabilitation. They believe that social workers are going to be able to rehabilitate them while they're out there running amok in the streets.
Okay, so I don't know if any of you saw my stories on Instagram. So you now have, and Alex, you called this. You talked about this. They have all these social workers now that are afraid to go out and do the job that they were supposed to do. I did a post on it on Instagram, and what I said on there was that when I ran for the LA County Board of Supervisors, the first thing I said is you need to have a police officer, a paramedic, and a social worker to go out in a team and assess what should be done, and it should be training along every single county law enforcement, along with city law enforcement, and it should be enacted together through all the fire departments so that it was trained and put together as a group. I actually talked to Horvath about doing that, and she came to me when I had already lost the race and was between her and Hertzberg, and she came to me and she said, I love your idea. As soon as I win, I want to talk to you about doing this. I still have not gotten a phone call. And that would have been a very good plan on how to help some of these homeless, and you'd get social workers to go out there because they have an armed officer to protect them from the crazy that's high on fentanyl or who knows what else, and the paramedic to get them so that they can stabilize them and take care of it.
What can go wrong sending out some very likely young female social worker to go out to some homeless encampment by herself, or maybe with another young female social worker, to deal with a homeless guy who's got mental issues, drug issues, and violence issues? It's almost as if you have no way to predict when one of these women is going to be brutally stabbed, murdered, etc. And then we'll come back and go, well, yeah, of course that happened. What would we expect? So,
Well, look at our homeless outreach service team, the ones that cleaned up Venice, the ones that cleaned up at the VA Center on San Vicente, Old Vera Street, all these different places. No arrests, no use of force. But to this day, Mayor Karen Bass is proud to say, we're doing this cleanup, but there's no law enforcement involved. Well, yeah, when it's raining cat and dog, it's not hard to convince someone to take shelter.
Right.
But now that the weather's getting better,
good luck with that, Karen.
It ain't going to happen. So let's be real about this. But the point is, our model work. It's a co-response model. We pair up with the LA Homeless Service Authority, with the Department of Mental Health, and we have our deputies provide the security where people can actually engage in higher level thinking. Maybe I want to clean up with that barber and talk to the young lady about a job. Maybe because now they feel better. Okay, I'm safe. They're not looking over their back for the next threat that's coming their way.
Sheriff, do you know how bad it is right now? I don't know if you know this because this happened since you left. George Gascon, we now have that they are putting together, I think it started, a shuttle service because where we all work is so dangerous that employees of the DA's office have been assaulted. So we have DA investigators, police officers who are basically going to now function, I guess, as Uber drivers, to move people around.
The world's most expensive Uber
Yeah.
drivers.
Yeah,
This is true.
For
With
people,
health insurance.
For people who don't know, real quick, some quick context is there's very little parking around the courthouse downtown for jurors, for witnesses, for victims, for employees. So a lot of our employees have to park 3-4 blocks away from the courthouse to walk.
Prosecutors.
Right. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, court reporters, everyone. And we've had some employees get assaulted. And so the Gascon administration decided, okay, well, rather than enforce the law, not just around the courthouse, but around Los Angeles, what we'll do instead is we'll pay our sworn investigators to shuttle our employees to and from parking lots.
In George Gascon's defense, you don't see him at the office a lot. So I'm not sure if he knows how bad things are because he doesn't see. It's a great gig if you can get it. I see him on Instagram. He's out there. He loves politicking. He loves appearing at media events with sympathetic audiences. Running the office and actually being the district attorney of Los Angeles doesn't seem to hold his interest.
Sandra Shells, that shuttle never came for her. Yeah. Too late.
That's right.
She was killed at Union Station. Mm-hmm. Brianna Cufford killed while working in West L.A.
Croft House.
Jackie Avant killed in her sleep. All three by homeless people that are been plying their trade, living on the subway system. Who ever heard of a transit system with 5,700 transients living on the system? It's insane. Prior to 2017, there was no transients on the system. You go to Metrolink, which we provide police service to, and that's 6 counties, over 500 miles of track, not a single transient. In fact, they've not had a single crime, I think, since January of this year. 2 absolutely different systems, and what's the difference?
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement makes a difference. Law enforcement is not in charge of the MTA system because the Board of Supervisors deliberately handcuffed law enforcement from doing their job.
But, Sheriff, they've got those ambassadors who can...
Here's another one. I'm working on confirming this, but I've heard that of those ambassadors, 100 of the 300...
have left the system.
Have a criminal history.
Yes. Oh.
Parolees, some form of a criminal history. So that'll really make the passengers feel better knowing who those ambassadors are in the green shirts.
Yeah.
Great. So we got ambassadors that are criminals.
Yes.
Oh, that sounds glorious to me. I mean, and what about? Here's the thing: you've got the lower income communities that are the ones that are using this transit system the most. These are the people that don't have cars, can't afford cars, or live in areas they can't park cars. They're the ones that are at use on these systems. And if you go to Street People of Los Angeles, I think it is that the one? They are forever posting people being beaten up on it, and I mean brutally beaten, and no one will stop to help these people because they're next because they have a group with them that beat the one individual.
In proof the collusion of corporate media in L.A., last year when a man was set on fire twice on the Gold Line, it was never reported in the news. That should have been national news.
Yeah.
And it was totally suppressed by the local media and the
same
MTA.
Guy, same route.
Guy was set on fire by a homeless female on the train. The passengers put him out. And she thought, well, her work wasn't done yet, so she set him on fire a second time.
Wow.
Left the guy in critical condition. And that, and then the 2 stabbings that happened a few days ago.
That's
in
right.
one day. And the murder that happened on the 7th Metro, the youngster that was killed as well. I mean, there's the level of violent crime is appalling, and the attitude of the entire MTA board is, let's continue experimenting because we want a virtue signal.
Well, but here's the other thing. Has anyone captured any of the people guilty of these things? And if so, how is the prosecutor's office even able to do anything with them?
Well, very few. Well, I don't know in those particular cases whether arrests were made or not. But let's assume they are made. If not, if they weren't already, they will be, because our law enforcement officers, the men and women, are still out there doing their jobs. Morale must be low because they make these arrests and then the DA throws the investigations in the trash. They're not going to be prosecuted properly. We already know what the directives are. Anybody listening to this station certainly knows. It's frustrating, and that's why we need change.
Then you've got the legislature, and again, working hand in hand with George Gascon and Rob Bonta, with the mental health diversion. People, if they walked into a court and saw what is happening, we have individuals who have committed horrible crimes of violence.
Oh, I've got a story. Can I tell it real quick?
We got 1 minute. We got 1 minute.
All right. Man takes his 3 young daughters, 13 and younger, to a casino. Leaves them in the car, puts the sun visor up so no one can see them inside, leaves them with an iPad and a bucket so they could go to the bathroom while he's inside the casino gambling.
Oh.
Okay. He was being watched by security who thought that he was sleeping in a car. So security goes out, they find these 3 young children, they find him in a casino gambling. He comes into court, we charge him with the appropriate, and this is a misdemeanor, probably should have been a felony, child neglect, and then he claims mental health diversion. Because we have this sweeping mental health diversion law now that is basically an escape exit for people who commit crimes. All they have to do is say that they have some kind of mental health problem, and they get diverted. His mental health problem, gambling.
Right. And it wasn't good enough the way they had the mental health diversion last year. For 2023, they made it even more easy for individuals to utilize it by changing the requirements as to how the crime had to relate to the mental illness. It is, if people saw how the hot dogs are being made right now, they would be absolutely in shock.
Well, we've got 10 seconds left, so if you're listening, you need to vote for John McKinney.
McKinney4LA.com, everybody. McKinney4LA.com.
And you need to donate because he needs to win.
Yes.
Alex, thank you so much for driving in again. We love having you in studio. John Lewin, we will have you back. You're awesome. And Don?
Yeah, well, everybody, good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight. And
thanks, David, for being on the mic, and Sal for getting everybody in and out and taking care of us on social media. So we'll be back next Saturday night. Don't be late. AM 870 The Answer, or the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club, and we will see you next week.